Welcome to today's live broadcast, Effective Workplace Training for English Language Learners. I am Judy O'Rourke of LabRoots, and I'll be your moderator for today's event. We have a few important announcements before we begin. This webcast is designed to be interactive, and we encourage you to ask questions during the event. You can submit questions by typing them in the Q&A box, which can be found by clicking on the green Q&A button at the lower left of the presentation window. We'll try to answer as many questions as we can. You can enlarge the slide window by clicking on the screen icon in the lower right-hand corner of the slide window. If you have any technical problems viewing or hearing this presentation, please click on the support button at the top right of your presentation window or submit your problem through the green Q&A button lower left. I would now like to introduce today's speaker, Paula Clifford. Paula Clifford is co-owner of Animal Care Training Services, ACTS, where she provides training services for the biomedical community, and executive director of the Pennsylvania Society for Biomedical Research, PSBR, where she is responsible for the vision and oversight of the statewide organization. I will now turn it over to Paula for her presentation.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Judy. Thank you so much, Judy. Well, good afternoon, everyone, or morning, depending where you're coming from. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I look forward to hearing your feedback and your ideas as we go through the presentation. All right, so first I just wanted to let you know that this is one of my very favorite topics in training. As a trainer, it's so important for us to create a safe, effective learning environment for everybody. It's hard to create a good environment if you don't understand or know your audience. When you're getting trained to be an effective trainer, one of the things that you learn in the very beginning is to get to know your audience. So when we're talking about our audience members who have English as not their first or second or third or fourth language, it's really important that we try to get to know them. So many years ago, I attended a session at LATE, the Laboratory Animal Welfare Training Exchange, and that's when I really sort of got the bug for this kind of a thing. I'm not sure if any of you in the audience saw this presentation, but it was given by Genevieve Friedland, and she actually worked at ALAS at the time. She doesn't work there now. And it was actually a session on teaching English language learners. The points in that session impacted every single training that I've conducted after it. It really helped me understand audience members from a variety of different cultural backgrounds. So from that point on, I adjusted my training for all different types of learners, making my training more effective. The presentation actually was developed into a course, so if you have access to the ALAS Learning Library, I highly suggest you check it out. It's still on there. And then last October, I had the opportunity to moderate a panel of experts at ALAS on teaching the English language learner. So the information that I learned there as the moderator, as well as tips that I learned, will be shared during this presentation as well. Can I just, so I just wanted to start out with a quick check on the audience so I could get to know you a little bit. So if you could use your Q&A sort of chat box there and just let me know how many of you out there are responsible for training. So I'm just going to wait a minute and see if some of you could just sort of chat in and say, yes, I'm responsible for training, or, okay, great. All right. So I see we do have some trainers out there. Great. I'd love to hear your experiences and your tips as well later in the presentation. Okay, so just so you know how we're going to sort of go through this presentation, if you read the abstract and looked at the objectives, you know that we're really just going to focus on areas where strategies to support English language learners can be implemented, and then I'll share some strategies. And I'm just going to really share a couple focus things because I really want you to walk away with some things that you can actually go back to the workplace and implement. So I'll do this by just getting us all on the same purpose, on the same page on the purpose of effective workplace training for English language learners. We'll identify easy areas where strategies could support these learners, and then I'll share some strategies and tips on how you can implement these things to increase your training effectiveness. And I'll also end with sharing some additional resources. There's a ton of support out there, so I wanted to share some of those resources for you. Okay, so purpose, right? So diversity, having a group of people from different cultural backgrounds gives you an enormous benefit in providing very different perspectives on a single issue. I think that's huge. And if you've done any reading or research in, the diverse workplace or world, you know this. It really provides the opportunity for a lot of different kind of approaches, resulting in a higher incidence of finding effective solutions. It opens the door to a lot of creativity and new ideas, and it's so important for our community, this community especially, because it allows us to better address animal welfare and ethical concepts within the right context. It's important to understand that different cultures have different, perspectives on how animals should be handled, how animals should be used, about their status in the society. And that's really important because if we don't understand that, it's really difficult. It's such a complex subject as it is. If you're not understanding where everybody's coming from, it's really hard to then be able to develop an effective training. And if you can understand that, your training can be effective, which will increase compliance. Okay, and another, a couple other things, just practical reasons as well. Having, addressing and supporting training for the English language learner is really going to help minimize discomfort, tough interactions, lack of trust, all these things that I have up on the slide there, and we could probably go on and on and on and on. An uncomfortable workplace is an unproductive workplace. Effectively managing a diverse workplace will increase workplace satisfaction, staff morale, and ultimately productivity, right? And finally, all these things do result in better science, and that's what we're all here for. Better science and good animal welfare. So a supportive, collaborative environment with diverse ideas really sets the stage for good science and the highest standards of animal care. Okay. But it's actually come with, it also actually requires new skill sets. So there's been several articles out there, and I'll talk about them a little bit later. There was an article by Dr. Stacy Pritt and others recently, I think it was in March of 2004, and talks about cultural competence. And it really requires a new set of skills, skills that we typically haven't been trained on. Managers don't come in with it usually, supervisors, staff people. So these skills, and I put some of them up there on the slide, you really need someone that has interest, drive, and energy to adapt cross-culturally. You need to possess an understanding of culture and the role of culture in personal interactions, animal attachment, and service transactions. That might seem obvious to some. It's not obvious to everybody, and it's very important. You need to be aware and plan approaches and monitor the effectiveness of cross-cultural interactions. So just don't assume that it's happening appropriately. Really be aware of it. Evaluate it, see what's happening, provide support for your staff. So these skill sets, and there's more shared in that article, are things that we have to think about when we're going to, on this talk, focus on our English language learner, but it's good to point out that when we're training our, and I will share some strategies on training your staff here, but something to think about in those performance evaluations and professional development of your staff. Okay, so some areas where you could easily implement. I'm sure you all could think of a ton of areas that you could implement these things, but here's a couple easy ones. Orientation. So when researchers or new staff start, very much in the very beginning of their time, and whether that's sort of the regulatory orientation or facility orientation, any kind of an orientation is a great area to try to implement some of these strategies. So I'll share some examples later as we talk about the different ones. Hands-on labs, another great place to implement some of these strategies. And an easy place, just couple minor, adjustments if you're not already doing these things really can help the effectiveness of your training. And then protocol writing. So this is in regards to new researchers that fall into this category. Find out things that they're doing that are very important to their job, and let's help them do it better. So really helping them with different vocabulary, vocabulary that's coming up a lot, things like that are great areas to focus on and help make sure that there's a good understanding. So before, I think we're going to go into the strategies. These I'm going to go through these one by one, but these are the strategy areas that I'm going to focus on. Doing research, training, using visual aids, and then some tips. So I'm curious, I have a poll out there that's going to come up. So if you guys could just take a minute and let me know, does anybody do any training now on cultural competence? Is that a part of your formal training program? So if so, yes. If not, no. And if you're not sure, let me know you're not sure. And if you just pick your answer and then click vote, that would be great. I'm just going to wait for a minute. Oh, I'm going to keep on going. Oh, okay. So I'm getting the results in now. So 66% do not. So that's a potential of 34% having it, or 34% not sure and having it. So 66% no. That's what I thought. I think we're still, in 2010, there were 2 articles that were published on this topic. And one was by Stacy Pritt and Jane Macta, where they talked about really needing to address this in the context of now we're really working, globally, and we're needing to develop virtual teams, and we're needing to develop policies across the world. So really having a better idea of this is going to be able to make those kinds of things more effective. And then another article earlier in 2010 by Leanne Allworth and others talked about diversity in laboratory animal science issues and initiatives. And this article, recognized that we've been talking about diversity in the workplace since the 80s, but really haven't been talking about it a lot in laboratory animal science community. So really starting the conversation about inclusion promoting activities and doing a better job there. So, excuse me. So we'll go on into each of these strategies. All right, so research. I am going to push out another poll, but not just yet. Let me talk about this for a minute. My next poll has to do with research. I'm curious to find out if anybody out there is using sort of structured research to evaluate your training programs in general. Here, I'm talking about coming up with some research projects to help understand your learner's perspective. And actually, if you're interested in the cultural competence and really want to focus on that, helping to look at that community and seeing what is their perspective. Remember, our people who are coming here to work, are you leaving their families or leaving their country? This stuck out to me in an article written by a veterinarian by the name of Latessa Hughes at the NIH, where she writes, these people are really brave to come over here. And so I think a lot of times we get frustrated when we're trying to get our job done and trying to, get our point across, when we really need to understand that this is a really new thing. So we need to understand a learner's perspective. So do people, so it's a good idea to research these things. So let's pause for a second. And in general, does anybody out there actually evaluate their programs in a formal way by setting up, like an IRB approved research project? And this is for just training programs in general. So why the results for that are coming in. I do know of at least one person one group who has done research specifically. She's a veterinarian at Penn State Hershey College of Medicine, an incredible person, and you can actually pull up one of our articles on a research project that she did in JLAS. I think it was just published last year, and I believe I have that in my references on my slides. Anyway, she was interested in, they went, they're interested in making sure that they have a really good environment for their learners. So they implemented a bunch of strategies to help support their English language learners. But then she thought, we really should evaluate this to figure out, is it working, is it not? So they actually did set up an IRB approved qualitative research study to do this. Now you do need, it's not something you could just walk off the street and do. You do need institutional resources, and you do need a little bit of training, and you can take a course on it. But those of you that are really interested in starting to do these kinds of things, please do publish your research. I ask about training programs in general. And it looks like 60% of you know, 10% of you yes, and 28% not sure. So those of you who are yes, that's excellent. And please do make sure you're publishing your results, because it's great for the rest of us in the training community to be able to see those results and be able to use them to help make decisions at our own places and maybe build on what you're finding. So you can do research through, different ways, some qualitative research or quantitative research, formal or informal. You know, getting results from interviews, surveys, focus groups can really help you improve your training. Just talking to your learners, really being interested in helping them understand that you really do want to make this the best for them and for the next group, it can be really helpful. So, you know, I do suggest that even if right now you're doing it sort of informally through surveys, really try to gather that information and analyze it and see if you can, you know, use that to help you make decisions on strategies that you are doing or strategies that you feel will be helpful for the group that you're focused on. Okay, so training. Lots of strategies in relation to training here. So the one I focus on in the first bullet is training trainers and staff in cultural competence. So some of the articles I share will provide some guidance on that. I do want to share a strategy that Andrea Knipe from our, and I'll share her contact information. She said it was okay. All of these people that I'm mentioning said it was okay for me to share their contact information because they really are primary resources for this kind of a thing. She shared a great program that they did at their institution, really immersing their staff in a situation where they were in a training in a different language. And it was really great because it was able to help them understand what they needed to better understand the material. And some of those strategies are actually shared here. So being able to, and there are, you know, there are people out there that can help you, you know, either talk you through what they did at their institution or even people you can hire to come on into your institution and do some of these trainings for your staff where, you know, and I think that's one of my favorite ones where you put your staff through an actual training session on something new in a different language. Another interesting method on doing training for trainers or your staff is to help you know, help them try to learn a different language, you know, in a situation where it's, you know, a workplace kind of a situation. And that's another way to really get people feeling, okay, so this is what they're going through. This is how they're feeling. And it helps you approach that person and understand your audience and really makes a difference on how you approach your training. And then there are ESOL classes, English for Speakers of Other Languages. These kind of classes can be, you know, some people get certified or actually degrees in this thing, but lots of times there are classes at their local community college, things like that. So those are always good to share with your English language learners to help them, but also have one of your own. So if you have a group of people that are interested, you can do a lunch. You know, some of the people that I mentioned and some other colleagues that I work with will set up either lunchtime sessions or after work sessions or something like that where you could get together and actually go through things. Maybe it's, you know, common vocabulary that's happening in the animal facility, or there's a common non-compliance because of not understanding. So you sort of, you know, arrange your lessons around that. So for any of you that want to learn more about that kind of a thing, those kind of programs, feel free to contact me after the session and I can share that. But that's really helpful too, because it not only gives information, you know, vocabulary and helping with that communication, but it also really shows that true, genuine focus on trying to help. And then another thing is in your trainings, you know, really talking with, you know, your trainers and your staff, when they're providing things for English language learners, it's really helpful to point out, like using keywords and written outlines. A lot of times that visual, instead of like a whole manual or just telling them something, a lot of times using handing them a written outline or some keywords is helpful too, because a lot of times they're learning from people who, if they learned English in their home country, lots of times they learned it from somebody who had the accent of the people in their own country. So their English might not sound like the English that they're hearing here. And also different parts of our country, the English sounds different. So sometimes when you could write it down, the reading is a little bit easier than the understanding audibly. Okay, so, and this is another one of, another easy an easy strategy that can be implemented in any of your main kinds of interactions or trainings that you do. Now, the translated or bilingual signs, that sometimes isn't so straightforward. Some institutions, not a big deal, translate signs in all different languages. Other institutions, it's not allowed, so that really depends on institutional policy, that kind of a thing. But think about how many signs we have in the animal facility. And I mean, definitely you need your institutional approval if it is something that's approved. Those really important things that we need to make sure, especially those that are higher risk for animal welfare kinds of issues, look at those things and find out, is it an area where you could have a picture or a translated sign or something like that. So this is a picture. Those of you who do hands-on training labs, I'm sure you know, even for English, people who aren't English language learners, the pictures are very, very helpful. They're helpful for all types of learners, as well as different culture, when you're having different cultures and things like that in the learning environment. So pictures, translated or bilingual signs. So what kinds of visual aids I just want to pause and get some feedback from the audience. Could you share some visual aids that you might be using already in your facility that support your English language learners? And I'm going to watch the Q&A box coming in, and I'll share with the audience what kind of signs or pictures that you all are using to support your English language learners now in your facilities. So we also have some pictures, simple signs, short videos, live demos, and then actually pointing at the words in the protocol. Great. Thank you. Okay. All right, and then I get to strategies, and I'm just going to share some of my favorite tips. There's lots of great tips. I might even add a couple other ones. I have in our resources section an article I really highly suggest that you read that includes great tips on great practical tips for teaching English language learners. So silence is okay. In our culture, we like to fill in the silence, ask a question or something like that, or ask if there are any questions, and if a second goes by and nobody answers, you move on to the next thing. When you have a group of English language learners, silence is actually good. So just think about it. If you were in a situation where you were just learning the language, somebody asked a question, you've got to translate the question, right? Answer it in your head, and then translate it back so you can answer it. So it does take a little bit of time. So do make sure that that time is given. Also, you know, different cultures are educated in different ways. They have different ways of you know, dealing with people that they see as teachers or authority or things like that. So try to understand that a little bit too, and be very, very clear about what's expected of them. So you must ask questions, or questions are encouraged. Asking questions is part of this training. You know, things like that, being very clear about, you know, this is what I expect. I expect you to ask me. I expect you to, you know, do this, that, and the other. So do check for understanding, as we've all probably experienced situations where we're teaching and then people are like, yes, yes, yes. Okay, do you understand? Yes, okay. Make sure, and we know this as for those of you who are trainers, you know, show me, tell me, you know what I mean, in a non-threatening kind of way. And you can do this by not you don't really need to put people on the spot. When you're doing something like a hands-on lab, I think that's the best, easiest way to check for understanding, because you can actually present the information and then you can have people demonstrate, you know, what you're talking about. So that's, I think, a really great way to be able to check for understanding. Some other places might not be as easy. So if you're doing say a facility orientation, you might be explaining a certain procedure for something, and then you could ask them, okay, you know, remind me, how do we do this again? Or show me, where did I say, you know, we get the euthanasia request cards, or something like that. You know, do it in non-threatening ways, but really check for that understanding, because you'll find out a lot of times you don't have the understanding when you think that you did. I love this one, learn another language. You can do it a million different ways, you know what I mean? But you can go to the library, you can buy tapes, you could, you know, go to maybe a section in town that has a, you know, that is largely speaking non-English, and try to learn it that way. You know, just somehow online, there's lots of resources. So really try to learn another language. Put yourself in their shoes, and that really does go a long way. And not only that, but learn their language. Learning another language helps you understand what they might be going through a little bit. But then if you could just learn a few things, that really helps too. And this is one of the tips that some of my colleagues on the panel shared. Really learn how to say hello or goodbye or good day, you know, things like that. Some really nice, a few simple things, and that will really help with that connection, which will help them know that you're really trying to help them, and help them be more engaged and more comfortable to let you know if they're having a problem. Make sure you keep your readers in mind when writing. You know, when you're writing, we talked about keywords and outlines. That's really helpful. So try to write as simple as you can. And there actually are, many of you may know this already, but on Word, there actually are, there's a tool to check your word counts and how simple and what the readability is of your writing. So if you're writing training materials that you're handing out, you should be checking your readability. And the article that I'm going to share really goes into detail about you know, some tips for that and what that should look like. And then if this is one of your favorite topics like mine, I'm not TESOL certified, but I hope to get there someday. You know, go check into the local community college. If you're at a university, check into some of the classes that they have there. Even you know, and see if you could get, you know, if this is part of your life and this is something that you are working with every day, you know, get certified, become more expert in this kind of a thing, and that will help you be a better trainer and help things be more effective when you're doing training, which will help you, your department, your organization, and the whole research community. Great. Okay. Okay, so these are some of the resources I wanted to share. So the article that I was talking about in the beginning by Dr. Stacy Pritt and some others is called Cultural Competency, and that's where it talks about skills that are needed for today's workplace to be competent in this kind of a thing. So that's a really good one. My other favorite one that I mentioned a couple times was the tips for training non-native English speakers by Letessa Hughes. That was Hughes, sorry, in Lab Animal, February 2014. So I highly suggest you check those out. They're really helpful. And then check out your, in university settings, cultural resource centers, your education departments, your HR departments. A lot of times we get so focused in the work that we're doing, and work is very busy, so a lot of times we don't get time to, focus on our own professional development. So it's awesome that you guys are all here today. But really look for, there is a lot of stuff out there within your own institutions that can help you support either educating yourself better on cultural competence, on ideas on how you can better support the English language learning community. And a lot of times, especially in the university environments, you can work with some other departments to help you set up those research projects that I was talking about. So you can really evaluate the effectiveness of some of the strategies that you'd like to implement, or evaluate areas where strategies should be implemented. Community college courses are good. There's a lot of, like I was mentioning, there's a lot of times your community college will have the TESOL, teaching students of other languages, certificates, things like that. Don't forget about the ALAS Learning Library course I told you about. Of course, it was great in person, but that's a really good one. It really provides a lot of just sort of basic things, good tips there. And then colleagues. So I have a few people to recommend, which I can share. And talk to each other. Find out what's working. Find out what doesn't work, and see how the better we do this, the better we will be as a research community, which ultimately leads to better science and cures and treatments for everybody. So I believe I have a PDF of this that will be provided. I just wanted to point out that I did put my references, some of my references on here, and these were mainly the articles that I pointed out during my presentation. And we're just about ready for Q&A, so I just found this awesome picture the other day, and it was just so appropriate for our presentation today. When we help each other, we really help ourselves. So when we help ourselves, we help each other. It goes both ways. So I know you all are committed to creating a good environment for people that you work with, both people and animals. So I wish you luck. And let's open it up to some questions, answers, as well as some feedback from you all on some tips and strategies that you could share with me and the other people on this webinar.
Thank you for that informative presentation. Before we get started on the question and answer session, I would like to remind our audience how to submit questions. You can submit questions by typing them in the Q&A box, which can be found by clicking on the green Q&A button at the lower left of the presentation window. And again, we'll try to answer as many questions as we can. First question is from Nancy Fadei, Charles River Laboratories. She asks, as an English language learner, is it mandatory to speak American English?
Good point. Okay, so when you say American English, I'm imagining you mean American versus British English. I don't think so, but I am not an expert on. I think I don't think so. If you're talking between American English and British English, I don't think it matters. Although if you talk British English, some people might not understand, so you might just need to explain because some words are a little bit different. But in general, I think you'll be fine. But I don't know of any sort of mandate that would require that. Hope that helps.
Okay, Jennifer Henry of McGill University asks, how do you differentiate between a failed exam theory course and a language barrier? And there's another question too, but let's answer this one first, and then we'll move to the next one, or maybe you want to answer both. How can we go about this in the nicest way possible?
That's a great question, and I didn't address assessments in this at all, but that's great. So I would suggest if the exam was only given one way, I would personally assume that it was a language barrier and provide, benefit of the doubt and provide the evaluation another way. A lot of times you can give an English language learner a written test, which they fail, but you can give them either an oral test or require some sort of a demonstration of the material, and they pass with no problem. And that helps you answer that question. So I recommend two ways, always two ways of evaluating.
So Angela Croucher from the University of Kentucky says, or asks you, how do you differentiate? Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry, but could you please repeat which AALAS course you were mentioning earlier?
Yes. So am I back on? Okay, sorry about that. Anyway, yeah, I'm sorry. It's called, I believe it's called Teaching. It's in the training section, and it's called Teaching, I think, English as a second language, students of English as a second language. I can't remember the title of the course as much as I've gone to it. So if I can ask the organizers how I can send that out to everybody. You could actually also submit questions during the on-demand period. So if you send me that question, I will send the title right over to you.
Okay, unfortunately, we are out of time. I want to thank the audience for their interesting questions and participation in today's event. And you will be able to submit more questions during the on-demand period, which I'll be telling you about in just a moment. Today's webcast will be available for on-demand viewing through August 25th. So again, continue to submit your questions. You'll receive an email from LabRoots alerting you when this webcast will be available for replay, and we invite you to forward that announcement to your colleagues who may have missed today's live event. See you next time. Goodbye.